let me ask you something simple but quietly revealing. When was the last time you counted down to your birthday? Not just remembered it was coming, not just casually mentioned it to friends, but actually felt the anticipation building, the way you did when you were a child, the way your heart used to thump with excitement at the thought of balloons, cake, and everyone's eyes turning toward you for one small, sacred day. For most people, that feeling fades somewhere between adolescence and adulthood. Birthdays become background noise, another year, another notification, another thank you to a few messages before moving on with the day. But not everyone lets go of that magic. Meet Jessica. She's 29 years old, marketing manager, lives in a small apartment in the city, and every single year, without fail, she starts planning her birthday exactly 6 weeks in advance. She creates a group chat, she sends out calendar invites, she picks a theme, she researches restaurants, books reservations, curates playlists, she posts countdown stories on Instagram. 3 weeks until my birthday. 2 weeks? 1 week. Her friends joke about it, some affectionately, some less so. "You really love your birthday, huh?" they'll say, half smiling. And Jessica always responds the same way. "Why wouldn't I? It's my day." But here's what Jessica doesn't say. Here's what she's never quite put into words, even to herself. Her birthday isn't just a celebration, it's a confirmation. It's proof that she exists in ways that matter, that people see her, that her presence in the world registers beyond her productivity, her usefulness, her role in other people's lives. Because the rest of the year, Jessica isn't sure anyone would notice if she disappeared. This is the psychology of people who don't treat their birthday like a normal day. And it's far more complex, far more vulnerable, and far more human than most people realize. People who make their birthday a celebration aren't shallow, attention-seeking, or immature. In fact, often they're the most emotionally honest ones. They're the ones who have learned something that many adults forget. Joy doesn't happen by accident. It happens by intention. Psychologically, how you treat your birthday reveals 3 fundamental things about you. First, it shows how you feel about taking up space, whether you believe your existence deserves acknowledgement or whether you've learned to minimize yourself. Second, it reveals how you relate to celebration itself, whether you see joy as something to be earned or something to be claimed. And third, it exposes how comfortable you are being the center of attention, not in a performative way, but in a vulnerable one, because when you celebrate your birthday openly, you're also hoping openly. And hope always carries the risk of disappointment. When someone says, "I love celebrating my birthday," what they're often saying is, "I've learned that if I don't advocate for my own joy, no one else will." But sometimes what they mean is, "I need this one day to feel seen." There's a difference between self-celebration and emotional hunger, and birthdays have a strange way of showing us which one we're experiencing. Dr. Susan Krauss-Whitbourne, a psychologist who studies identity and aging, found that people's relationship with their birthdays often mirrors their relationship with self-worth. Those who celebrate enthusiastically tend to fall into 2 distinct categories. The first category, people who have internalized secure self-worth. They celebrate because life feels abundant, and they want to share that abundance. Their birthdays are expressions of gratitude, not requests for validation. The second category, people who are seeking external confirmation of their value. They celebrate because they need evidence that they matter. Their birthdays are less about joy and more about measurement, counting who shows up, who remembers, who cares enough to make an effort. And here's what's fascinating. From the outside, these 2 types of birthday celebrators look identical. Same party, same Instagram posts, same enthusiasm, but internally the experience is entirely different. Jessica belongs to the second category, though she'd never admit it. because admitting it would mean confronting something she's spent years avoiding. The fear that if she stopped orchestrating her own celebration, no one would celebrate her at all.
To understand why some people make their birthdays unmissable events, we have to go back to childhood, back to the first birthdays that shaped how they see themselves.
Think about this. Your early birthdays taught you what you deserve. If your childhood birthdays were magical, if your parents made a big deal, if there were traditions, rituals, cake with candles, friends singing, gifts wrapped with care, then your young mind learned something powerful. This day is special because I am special. You internalize the belief that your existence is worthy of celebration, not because of what you do, but simply because you are. And that programming doesn't just disappear when you turn 18, it becomes the template for how you expect the world to treat you. But for others, the blueprint looks different. Meet Marcus. He's 35 now, software engineer. Quiet, thoughtful, measured in most things except his birthday.
When Marcus was 7 years old, his parents forgot his birthday, not because they were cruel, they were just overwhelmed. Divorce proceedings, financial stress. His little brother was sick. Life was chaos. So his 7th birthday came and went. No cake, no presents, no song.
He remembers sitting at the kitchen table that evening, watching his mother cook dinner like it was any other night, and feeling something crack inside his chest. A small voice that whispered, "Maybe I don't matter as much as I thought." The next year, his parents remembered, they threw him a party. Apologized profusely for the previous year. Overcompensated with gifts. But Marcus never forgot that feeling, that hollow, invisible ache. And now, as an adult, Marcus doesn't just celebrate his birthday. He announces it, he sends reminders, he plans elaborate dinners. He makes absolutely certain that no one, not his partner, not his friends, not his colleagues, can possibly forget. He tells people it's because he loves celebrating life. But the truth, the one he can barely acknowledge even in therapy, is simpler and sadder.
He's still that 7-year-old boy, making sure he's never forgotten again.
Psychologists call this compensatory celebration. It's when you use present-day rituals to heal past-day wounds. You're not celebrating the adult you are now. You're reparenting the child you once were. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's one of the most tender forms of self-care. But it does come with a cost, because when your celebration is driven by old pain rather than present joy, you can never fully enjoy it. You're too busy scanning the room, counting who showed up, measuring whether you've finally done enough to prove you're worth remembering. Let's talk about what's really happening beneath the surface when someone plans their birthday celebration weeks in advance, posts countdown updates, and meticulously curates every detail. They're not just planning a party, they're creating a validation checkpoint. Modern psychology recognizes something called the birthday paradox of self-worth. It works like this. Throughout the year, most people receive scattered, inconsistent feedback about whether they matter. A compliment here, a forgotten text there, moments of connection mixed with moments of invisibility. For people with secure attachment and stable self-worth, this inconsistency is manageable. They have an internal foundation that doesn't require constant external reinforcement. But for people whose self-worth is more fragile, perhaps because of childhood neglect, adult isolation, or simply the grinding loneliness of modern life, that inconsistency feels destabilizing.
So the brain does something clever. It concentrates all the need for acknowledgement into one day, one moment, one unmissable event. It's called emotional concentration. You're not asking to be seen every day, you're just asking to be seen on this one day. Surely that's not too much to ask.
Jessica does this. She doesn't text her friends saying, "Hey, I'm feeling invisible lately. Could you check in on me?" That feels too needy, too vulnerable, too pathetic. But she can say, "It's my birthday next month. Let's plan something." That's socially acceptable. That's allowed. So her birthday becomes the vessel for all the recognition she craves but can't ask for the rest of the year. And here's where it gets psychologically complex. This strategy works, kind of. When her birthday comes and people show up, when they bring gifts, when they sing, when they post photos and tag her and write, "Happy birthday to this amazing human," she feels it. The warmth, the mattering, the proof that she's not invisible. But the relief only lasts about 3 days. Because deep down, a quiet voice asks, did they celebrate me because they wanted to, or because I orchestrated the entire thing?
Would they have remembered if I hadn't sent 5 reminder texts?
Do they actually care, or are they just being polite? And that's the trap of birthday-based validation. The more you engineer your own celebration, the less you can trust that the celebration is genuine. Dr. Kristin Neff, who studies self-compassion, calls this the performance paradox. When you perform your need for recognition, even through something as innocent as planning a birthday party, you can never fully receive what you're actually seeking, which is spontaneous, unconditional acknowledgement. It's like laughing at your own joke and then asking, "Was that funny?" You've contaminated the data. But let's flip the narrative for a moment, because not everyone who celebrates their birthday is driven by insecurity or childhood wounds. Some people celebrate because they've learned something genuinely beautiful about human connection. Meet Alicia. She's 42, mother of 2, runs a small bookstore, and every year without fail she throws herself a birthday party. Not a quiet dinner, a party, music, dancing, 30, 40 people. She makes a whole production of it.
And when you ask her why, she doesn't talk about herself, she talks about community.
My birthday is the one day a year when I get to gather everyone I love in one room, she says. Not for a wedding, not for a funeral, not for some obligation, just to celebrate the fact that we're all still here, still connected, still showing up for each other. For Alicia, birthdays aren't about ego, they're about ecosystem. She's learned that modern life scatters people, work, kids, distance, exhaustion. Months can pass without seeing the people who matter most. But a birthday, that's an excuse, a culturally sanctioned reason to say, come together, pause, remember why we matter to each other. There's actually deep psychological wisdom in this. Social psychologist Dr. Sherry Turkle, who studies connection in the digital age, argues that we're experiencing an epidemic of alone together. We're surrounded by people but rarely truly connected. And rituals, she argues, are one of the few remaining structures that create genuine presence. Birthdays, when done right, can be powerful rituals of belonging. So when Alicia celebrates her birthday loudly and unapologetically, she's not being narcissistic, she's being communal. She's creating a moment that says, we exist together, and that's worth celebrating. Her friends don't feel obligated, they feel grateful, because she's given them permission to pause their scattered lives and remember, this matters, we matter. That's the healthiest form of birthday celebration. Not a cry for validation, but an invitation to connection. But here's the question that haunts even people like Alicia sometimes. Would they still come if I didn't ask? There's a psychological phenomenon that researchers are only beginning to understand. It's called the visibility complex, and it affects people who celebrate their birthdays more than they'd like to admit. Here's how it works. When you make yourself highly visible, when you announce, plan, post, and celebrate, you create a spotlight. And that spotlight does 2 things simultaneously. First, it illuminates you. People see you, acknowledge you, respond to you. Second, it exposes you. It makes your need visible. And in a culture that values independence and not caring what others think, visible need feels like weakness. So people who celebrate their birthdays enthusiastically often experience a split internal dialogue. Part of them thinks, I deserve this, I'm allowed to want celebration.
Another part whispers, being too much, people probably think I'm desperate.
This is the double bind of visibility. You can't be seen without also revealing that you want to be seen. And wanting to be seen feels embarrassing. Jessica experiences this constantly. 2 weeks before her birthday, she'll start dropping hints in conversations. So my birthday's coming up. I'm thinking of doing something fun for my birthday. Has anyone thought about plans for the 15th? The 15th is her birthday. And every time she does this, she feels a small wave of shame. Am I being annoying? Am I making this too big a deal? But she can't stop herself, because the alternative, saying nothing and hoping people remember, feels even worse.
Because then, if they forget, she can't even be mad. She didn't ask. She has no right to be disappointed. At least this way, if they forget, she can think, well, I told them. I made it clear. Their forgetfulness says something about them, not me.
It's a preemptive defense mechanism. She's protecting herself from the emotional devastation of being forgotten by making herself unforgettable. But protection has a cost. The cost is uncertainty. When you orchestrate your own celebration, you never get to experience the pure, unmanipulated joy of someone choosing to celebrate you spontaneously.
And that's what Jessica wants most. Not the party, not the gifts, not even the posts.
She wants someone to wake up on her birthday and think, it's Jessica's day. I need to do something special for her. Without her asking, without her reminding, without her planning.
Just because she matters.
But as long as she keeps orchestrating everything, she'll never know if that would happen naturally. Let's zoom out for a moment and look at the bigger picture. Because individual psychology doesn't exist in a vacuum, it's shaped by culture. And Western culture, particularly American culture, has a complicated relationship with birthdays. On one hand, we celebrate individualism. We're taught that you matter, that you're special, that your uniqueness should be honored. On the other hand, we shame people for wanting too much attention. We mock birthday week people. We roll our eyes at elaborate celebrations. We call people extra or high maintenance if they make too big a deal. So people are caught in a cultural contradiction. You're supposed to value yourself, but not so much that you make others uncomfortable. You're supposed to celebrate your existence, but quietly, humbly, without asking for too much. This contradiction hits birthday celebrators particularly hard, because when you throw yourself a party, you're making a public declaration. I matter enough to take up space. I matter enough to gather people. I matter enough to ask you to show up for me. And in a culture that preaches self-sufficiency and emotional independence, that feels dangerous. Anthropologist Dr. Margaret Mead studied ritual celebrations across cultures and found something fascinating. In collectivist societies, birthdays are community events, not individual ones. The person whose birthday it is doesn't plan the celebration, the community does. But in individualist societies like ours, you're expected to advocate for your own celebration, which creates a paradox. You have to ask for the very thing that only feels meaningful if it's given freely. Marcus feels this acutely. Every year he struggles with the same internal battle. Should he plan something and risk seeming needy? Or should he wait and hope someone else takes initiative? Last year, he tried the passive approach. He didn't mention his birthday, didn't send hints, didn't make plans. He told himself, if people really care, they'll remember. His birthday came, a few texts, a couple posts. his mom called. But no one planned anything, no one suggested dinner, no one organized anything. And Marcus spent the evening alone in his apartment, ordering takeout, telling himself he didn't care. But he did care. God, he cared so much and he felt invisible, forgotten, unimportant. So this year, he went the opposite direction. He planned everything, sent invites 3 weeks early, made reservations, created a whole event. And people came, they celebrated, it was fine. But afterward, lying in bed, he felt hollow because he still didn't know, would they have done this if he hadn't forced it? The question haunts him.
And it haunts millions of people who celebrate their birthdays loudly, enthusiastically, unapologetically.
Beneath the celebration is a question they're terrified to answer. Am I loved, or am I just good at organizing? But let's end on a different note, because there's another way to understand people who celebrate their birthdays, not as wounded, not as needy, not as desperate for validation,
But as brave.
because here's what celebrating your birthday really means. It means you've decided that your existence deserves acknowledgement, not because of what you achieve, not because of what you provide, not because of how useful you are, just because you're here.
And in a world that constantly tells you to be smaller, quieter, less demanding, choosing to take up space on your birthday is an act of self-love.
Alicia understands this. She doesn't apologize for her parties. She doesn't minimize her celebrations.
When someone says, "Wow, you really go all out for your birthday," she smiles and says, "Yeah, I do, because I'm worth celebrating."
Not arrogantly, not defensively, and just truthfully. She's learned that waiting for the world to celebrate you is a losing game. The world is busy, distracted, forgetful.
But that doesn't mean you're not worth celebrating.
So she celebrates herself. She gathers her people. She creates the moment. And in doing so, she gives everyone else permission to do the same. Because when you celebrate yourself publicly, you're modeling something radical. The belief that joy doesn't need to be earned. That existence itself is enough. That you don't need to wait for permission to honor your own life. Jessica is starting to learn this slowly. This year, when someone asked, "Why do you make such a big deal about your birthday?" she paused, and instead of her usual defensive response, she said something true. Because I spent too many years feeling invisible, and I decided I'm not going to feel that way anymore, even if I have to celebrate myself.
And you know what? The person smiled and said, "I respect that." Because deep down, everyone wants permission to matter. Everyone wants to be seen.
Some people just have the courage to ask for it out loud. So if you're someone who makes your birthday a celebration, who plans it, announces it, makes sure it's acknowledged, know this: your joy is not selfish. Your desire to be seen is not weakness. You've simply learned that life is too short to let meaningful moments pass unmarked. You can love celebration and still be emotionally mature. You can want recognition without being needy. You can throw yourself a party and still be deeply secure. Because treating your birthday like it matters doesn't mean you're broken. It means you've decided that your existence deserves acknowledgement, and you're brave enough to claim it.
Maybe that's the truest kind of strength, not needing the world's permission to celebrate being alive. So the next time someone celebrates their birthday loudly, don't roll your eyes.
Show up, celebrate with them.
Because what they're really saying is, "I'm still here." And that's worth something.
And they're right.
It is.